Thank you for joining us. My name is Sajida Shroff, and I am president of the Harvard Club of the UAE and the Harvard Global Women's Empowerment SIG. I'm also very pleased to be co-chair of the MENA GCC Harvard Alumni Entrepreneurs Chapter. Harvard Alumni Entrepreneurs is a shared interest group of the Harvard Alumni Association. HAE is a global nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of entrepreneurship, innovation, leadership, and learning. Its 15 global chapters connect alumni from all 15 of Harvard schools through events, podcasts, fellowships, co-working spaces, and so much more. A small team of Harvard alumni from various schools across the university founded the MENA GCC chapter last fall with the aspiration of making meaningful contributions to the development of our region's entrepreneurial ecosystem. Allow me to introduce the founding team. My name is Sajida, and I am chapter lead. My co-lead is George. We also have Aaron and Lila, who are responsible for outreach. Mia and Ariane, who handle the secretariat and social media. And last but not least, Nabil and Abdullah, who handle events and support services. While we expect to diversify our team and our efforts over time, we wanted to begin with the goal of understanding all parts of our region's entrepreneurial ecosystem and how they work together, so we can continue to focus our efforts and the efforts of those we bring together on maturing this ecosystem over time. Understanding is the focus for the dialogue we will be hosting this evening. We are humbled to have a panel of speakers who are not only leaders in their fields, but together represent a broad cross-section of the ecosystem of players that entrepreneurship requires. And of course, we are very grateful to have participants from all over the world. This event is at its core a dialogue with all of you, so please do feel encouraged to share your questions in the chat box, and we will address as many of them as we can. We will, of course, be recording this event. I also would like, before we begin, to take a minute and say a very special thank you to Regina, who is the president of the global chapters of HAE. Regina, thank you for joining us and for all your support. Before we start, we would like to take a screenshot to post on social media. If you don't wish to have your photo taken, please just turn your camera off. Otherwise, please turn your camera on and get ready to smile. Mia and Ariane, are you ready to take the picture? You might want to shut off the slide projector, the slides, yeah? Ready? Great. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. Thank you again, everybody, for participating. Our facilitators this evening are Abdullah Al-Jafri and Aaron Fallon, who will now introduce themselves as well as our speakers. Over to you, gentlemen.
Abdullah, I think you're on mute still.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry, thank you, Sajida. Allow me first to introduce myself. I'm Abdullah Al-Jafri, a senior government attorney at Abu Dhabi Judicial Department. I'm the president of Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Network in the UAE. I'm also the co-founder of Najah Train, an Arabic e-learning platform.
And hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Fallon. I work on outreach here for the GCC/MENA branch of the HAE. I get to do a lot of what I would consider social entrepreneurship in my day job. I work at a local family foundation here in Abu Dhabi called the Salama bint Hamdan Al Nayan Foundation.
Aaron and I will be facilitating the dialogue this evening. We will begin by introducing our speakers.
So I'll begin by, oh, sorry, go ahead.
From the investment and policy world, we are joined by His Excellency Marwan bin Jassim Al-Sarkar, the Executive Chairman of the Sharjah Investment and Development Authority, Shuruq. His Excellency joined Shuruq as its CEO in 2009 and has established Shuruq as a driving force behind Sharjah's transformation into key investment, tourism, and business destination in our region.
Bringing the incubator / accelerator and tech perspective, we are joined tonight by Hanan Al-Yafe, the Chief Executive Officer of Hub 71. Hanan took the helm of Hub 71 last year, bringing a wealth of experience building and leading teams at Mubadala, where she was most recently the Executive Director of Human Capital, and at the Advanced Technology Investment Company, where she previously managed corporate communications and also headed their human capital efforts.
We are also joined by Yaron Sami, an Israeli-American technology entrepreneur, investor, and startup community builder. Yaron is the founder of Tech Aviv, a 3,000-member global Israeli startup founders club. He is also the managing partner of Tech Aviv Founders Partners, a pre-seed venture fund, as well as a founding CEO and a founding board member on 5 startups he has helped build.
And finally, our fourth speaker comes from the VC space, Noor Sweid, the founder of Global Ventures, a UAE-based growth stage venture capital firm. And prior to Global Ventures, Noor was the Chief Investment Officer at the Dubai Future Foundation and managing partner at Leap Ventures, a growth stage venture capital firm based out of Dubai and Beirut. She is also the founder of ZenYoga, which was the first yoga studio in MENA, and grew to become the region's largest wellness chain before successfully exiting to a private equity firm.
So we will begin by asking each of our 4 speakers to answer an opening question. Then we will continue the discussion with a few specific questions we have prepared for each speaker. Our goal is to explore as many aspects of MENA's entire entrepreneurial ecosystem this evening. So in our follow-up questions, we will cover a range of topics with each speaker. Next, we'll take questions from our audience members. So please add any question you'd like to hear discussed in the chat. And finally, we will ask each speaker to offer closing remarks.
So let's get started. Tonight's dialogue is all about understanding our ecosystem, where it is today, and where it should head in the future. So we'd like to start by asking each speaker to briefly introduce themselves and their organization, and share a few thoughts on the following question. From your vantage point, what are the most pressing challenges and opportunities you see for our region's entrepreneurial ecosystem? Hanan, will start with you, followed by Your Excellency Marwan, then Yaron and Noor. Hanan, please.
On.
All right, great. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you everyone for hosting me, and I'm excited to be having this conversation with everyone here today. As Aaron mentioned, my name is Hanan Al-Yafe. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Hub 71. My role is to drive Hub 71's vision through strategy development and work on bridging the ties between the public and the private sectors, work with multinational companies, tech companies, and policymakers here in Abu Dhabi to facilitate and help startups grow and be successful. And ultimately, the plan is to contribute to Abu Dhabi's technology and innovation agenda. Hub 71 is Abu Dhabi's tech ecosystem. What we are doing is we are creating a community of startups, founders, tech companies, venture capitalists, and exceptional talent. We do this through partnership. So we have partnerships with some renowned companies such as Microsoft, SoftBank, Abu Dhabi-based Mubadala investment company, and we work with the government of Abu Dhabi through Ghadan 21, the Economic Accelerator Program. And what we do is we support startups by providing them with access to capital, to talent, market and a competitive and compelling business environment. To answer your question, Aaron, on the most pressing challenge, I have to say that it has to be the pandemic right now. So the COVID-19 created these challenges for everyone around the world, right? It impacted economies, it impacted people's livelihood, it impacted companies large and small. So startups has been one of those entities that have been deeply impacted through the pandemic as well. And but at the same time, I would say this also provided an opportunity for some startups and to really pivot and shift. So, for example, in a lot of economies, such as the UAE, COVID-19 presented an opportunity to really accelerate the digitalization of the pace of work that we've been doing. Therefore, that itself presented a unique opportunity for quite a lot of startups to get into that space and pivot their businesses. It has, unfortunately, it has been really good for businesses within the education technology, so edtech, within health tech sectors, and for thriving and founders who are really hustling to find their ways, there has been opportunities.
Thank you, Hanan. Your Excellency, Marwan.
You're muted.
Okay. Okay, are we good? Yeah. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Thanks, Hanan, for starting the session. I would like to thank Harvard alumni entrepreneurs for giving us the opportunity to talk about and to share our knowledge with all of the participants that here. I see we have almost 73 participants with a couple of chats starting in. I would like to give an intro about who am I and what we have done in the past decade or so. Maybe I'll start from a personal level. I've graduated from the Higher College of Technology in Dubai, worked in Sharjah Electricity and Water Authority, then worked in Dubai Shopping Festival, Dubai Summer Surprises. I was actually a presenter and executive producer on Dubai TV, having my own motoring program. Then I managed to go over to Sharjah, manage Al Qasba Development Authority, then founding Sharjah Investment Authority. Within that, we've developed many projects from hospitality to mobility, to logistics, to sustainability, to recycling, all the way to creating from restaurants to hotels, from tourism related project in the middle of the desert or the middle of nowhere, to actually developing an entrepreneurship center as Shira'. In the past decade, what we tried to do by creating Sharjah Investment and Development Authority is to create an entity where we encourage investors to come invest in Sharjah, promoting and telling them more about the investment opportunities, where we would like investors, foreign investors, to invest in, and what are the developments that we would like to develop and see Sharjah grow. Sharjah is one of the unique emirates of the 7 emirates. It has a focus on creating and nurturing startups, and within also an emirate that focuses a lot on education, and it's an emirate that celebrates success in within. So it's not about getting international brands only, but creating their own brand by themselves. So in the past decade, we tried to create different positioning for different cities within the Emirate of Sharjah. Sharjah is a very diverse emirate. It has areas that sits on the Indian Ocean, an area that sits on the Arabian Gulf. So we tried to create a positioning for each emirate within our agenda here. What we try to do is also we try to promote investments into different sectors such as sustainability, environment, healthcare, and education. In the past decade, what we managed to do is to position ecotourism as one level. On another level, promote foreign direct investments throughout traveling all around the globe, promoting Sharjah. Then enhancing the fine dining experience in Sharjah, and then creating eco or boutique units as 5 bedrooms in the middle of the desert as a retreat, a boutique hotel in Sharjah called the Chedi Al Bayt Hotel, all the way to coming up with getting Kareem, Uber to Sharjah, opening up a real estate company as Sharjah Sustainable City, Mariam Island. So a very diversified portfolio. What happens as within COVID, a lot of things arise, a lot of challenges, but with a lot of challenges came a lot of opportunities. We used to work a lot on traveling around the world, promoting Sharjah internationally, sending the message that Sharjah is a welcoming state that welcomes foreign investment. But what we noticed within the challenges that we can't travel. However, we moved towards digitalization. And this is something that we found a great opportunity to attract investments in. The second thing is that we found that sectors that we never thought that were a thriving sector is actually a sector to focus on. So we went into looking at vertical farming, food security. We looked at mobility in a different level. And I think what is nice about the world, it teaches you that for every challenge comes an opportunity. We also support and focus a lot on startups. We love to see our startups grow first of all locally, then regionally, then internationally, and we're here to support them. We are an entity that creates an area. So we develop a lot of projects in Sharjah, Khorfakan, Kalba, and we create spaces for those entrepreneurs to thrive in those. Usually as developers, it's best to get the well-known names for us. It's better for us to get the names that will actually be one day well-known. And this is part of the motto that we have within Shuruq. Shuruq is headed by Her Excellency Sheikh Badur bin Sultan Al-Qasimi. She's the chairperson of Shuruq. She's also the president of the International Publishing Association. So education is a big aspect of Sharjah. What is it about? And we always say we're learning from our investors that are coming to us to invest in Sharjah. We're guiding them on what to invest in, and we are here to work with them closely. So as we speak, as they say, in the pandemic, there are a lot of challenges. We managed to get almost $1 billion dirham of investment within the toughest year in the history of our era, I would say. That's just in a nutshell of what we do, but we have a lot to talk about in the coming minutes. Thank you.
Your Excellency. We are going to you, Yaron, please. Okay.
So hello, shalom, salam alaikum to everybody. I have to say, I thought my resume was impressive, but after listening to His Excellency, I feel very inadequate. That is an amazing amount of work, and my hat's off to you for all that you've done for the region. So I will be very brief for the sake of time so we can continue on with the event. I'm going to add a link here to Tech Aviv so everyone can see it in the chat. I'm the founder of Tech Aviv. It's an organization that's been around since 2007. It's the Global Israeli Startup Founders Club. It's a nonprofit private network of Israeli founders who have, over the last 13 years, gotten together in over 200 events. Prior to Corona, we would meet physically, now online. The whole spirit of our organization is to try to harness our collective knowledge and our networks in building great companies so that fellow Israeli founders can learn how to do so, and we can help them out as best we can. The most recent development in our organization is that we've also added a founders fund. It's called the Tech Aviv Founder Partners, where the most successful members in our organization have actually come together, joined forces to back our next generation. That's Tech Aviv. Everyone is welcome to check it out at techaviv.com. To the question, so we can move forward. I'll take a contrarian point of view on the challenges. Hanan pointed out, and this is absolutely correct, the pandemic is by far the biggest challenge all entrepreneurs face globally. But for our region, I think it poses a unique opportunity. And that is, it's unlocked the monopoly that Silicon Valley has in talent, entrepreneur, and investor interest. We've learned that we built any remote, you can connect with anyone around the world. Israel, for example, in 2007 had a record-breaking year in VC dollars invested, $9 billion, all over Zoom. This is without actually meeting investors internationally. And Israel, by the way, is very prolific. It's has the largest number of VC capital invested per capita in the world, the largest number of startups per capita in the world, the largest number of unicorns per capita in the world. We've gotten good at producing startups, and we've shown that you can continue to do it and become, a center, a global center for activity, because the world has become more global. I think the pandemic is an opportunity for MENA to really take off and get a lot of international attention and investment dollars. I'll tell you one more opportunity that I see from the vantage point of sitting here in Tel Aviv. Israel is a country the size of New Jersey. We have 8 million people. We have no local market. The day you launch an Israeli startup, you're global. And global meaning you got to go sell and market in the US. While all along we've had 400 million cousins in our backyard that we haven't had access to previously. And with the warming relations with the UAE and the broader Arab region, it's a massive opportunity for Israeli startups to be able to do business locally with our neighbors.
And Noor, over to you as well. Thank you, Yaron.
Thank you, Aaron, Abdullah, Sajida, and everyone for having us on this call and for putting together such a great group of people. So my current role is as a general partner at Global Ventures. We are a VC firm that's based in the UAE. We invest across the Middle East and Africa. We also have teams and offices in Cairo and in Saudi Arabia. We have someone in Tunis. So we are just focused really across the region. Our mandate is to invest in regional companies that are scaling globally, and some regional white spaces. But we like to believe that founders are everywhere, entrepreneurs are everywhere, and emerging market problems are going to be solved by emerging market founders. No one's sitting in Silicon Valley thinking, how do I do last mile logistics if there are no street addresses? So really it is about identifying problems that affect hundreds of millions of people and working towards solving them. We are now very excited about certain industries. So we are on our second fund, which is half dedicated to digital health. We believe that what this pandemic has done as an opportunity to answer the question is really accelerate the priority of healthcare inclusion. So we take a look back, and we are very much a thesis-driven firm, and we take a look back at the financial crisis and take a look at the financial crisis as what spearheaded then the growth of fintech and financial inclusion as a priority for most governments and a lot of technologists. And now we're seeing this healthcare crisis spearheading the need for healthcare inclusion to be prioritized. And we think again of emerging markets as where that need is most dire, where hundreds of millions of people are impacted by it. And as very much intentional investors, we draw a lot of parallels. So in the financial inclusion, people went from kind of cash and coin to mobile wallets, completely skipping the legacy infrastructure of banking. And in healthcare inclusion, we believe that people will go from no doctors to teledoctors, from no diagnostics to remote diagnostics, completely skipping that infrastructure of hospital building and clinic building. So really taking a look at how can technology accelerate healthcare inclusion and impact hundreds of millions of lives. That is half of our second fund. And the other half is all the other COVID accelerated industries that we're more than happy to talk about over the coming half an hour. So that's us. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noor. And thank you to all of our speakers for those great introductions and reflections on our opening question. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes in dialogue with our speakers on a number of more specific questions we've prepared for them, and also any questions that our audience raises in the chat box. I've already seen a couple, but please, as our speakers carry on, feel free to add additional questions you have for them in the chat. Hanan, we're going to start with you. Actually, you talked a lot about all of the services and sort of context and environments that you offer to the entities and the startups in Hub 71. We'd like to ask you a more fundamental question, which is, what are you looking for when you're kind of evaluating the undoubtedly many opportunities that come your way? How do you kind of spot a good idea from your vantage point?
Okay, so Hub 71, we offer incentive programs to support startups. And we are generally sectors agnostic. So we welcome all technology-based startups to join our community. As of today, we've got more than 75 startups from 16 different sectors. So yes, we do have our general criteria for companies to enroll into our incentive program. And that varies from, we look at high growth tech companies, we look with a minimum viable product, we look at them, targeting large user base or potential pool for revenue. We tend to look at startups that do have VC backing, so funding in the past 3 years or so. And what's really important is we are looking for startups that would want to set up a meaningful presence in Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi. And we do have our process, a rigorous process that does include AI as we look and screen. But on top of everything else, what is really important is the founder itself. How much are they passionate? So how passionate are they about the idea, about the problem that they're trying to solve? How passionate are they about the technology? What kind of emotional intelligence do they have in terms of being able to attract team members and convince them enough to be part of their team? We're really looking for leadership characteristics in these founders and resilience. I think the key word here is really resilience. Are they really looking to fight for their ideas? And we've had cases like this, right? We've had cases of startups that apply for our program. They might not necessarily have the revenue targets that we wanted or the traction in the market, but we really liked that founder. There was something about, in this case that I'm thinking of, they were passionate about wellness. It was a wellness tech company. And we asked them to stay in touch with us and come back to us once they were ready, and that happened. So in a couple of, so about 6 months later, they did apply, and they're now part of our community. So what's really important is the founder, their passion for the technology and their resilience, and especially during times like this, resilience is what we're looking for in our founders.
Thank you, Hanan. Going to Your Excellency Marwan, building up on what just Hanan said about the passion, about the importance of having the character in this time, in the pandemic, and you've just shared this in your opening remark about how opportunities were important in during this time, and Shuruk made a huge difference. So my question is, Your Excellency, how important is entrepreneurship for macroeconomic policy? What role does it need to play in our ongoing economic development? And why does it matter for our future?
Okay, I totally agree with what Hanan has actually mentioned about being resilient, being committed, and I truly think that an economy needs fresh blood. An economy needs fresh ideas. An economy needs entrepreneurship. And if we go back to the basics of the United Arab Emirates, this country was built on an entrepreneurship level that we've seen a lot of the families that created and came up with a lot of ideas, came up with this entrepreneurship mindset. We want to see a new generations of the Ghurairs, of the Rustomanis, of the Abbars. We can't live on the current names that we have. And I think the government will have to create an opportunity for the newcomers to come. There are many sectors that we can encourage investors as entrepreneurs to come in that. And that's why the United Arab Emirates created different platforms. In Abu Dhabi, you have a platform. In Dubai, you have a platform. In Sharjah, you have a platform. And Ras Al Khaimah and Ajman. So all of the 7 Emirates created a platform. The issue is that we need those entrepreneurs to work together closer rather than working in silos. And what we found that they all compete in the same industry or in the same field, and that's why they usually fail. The other thing is we need to have someone that will back them up financially, emotionally, guide them. And this is where we find that there's a lot of detachment between the entrepreneurs with the ideas, the VCs, and also the local community. Some would thrive in a sector, some would fail in another sector. And I think what we need to do is we need to have a lot of trust in those entrepreneurs that are living in the UAE as a country. We don't have to look at entrepreneurs with their nationality. Anyone living here is a local entrepreneur that we need to support. And that's why within Shuruq, when we created Shira', the idea was we don't look at nationalities. We support everyone and every nationality. We believe in their ideas and we basically support them with guiding them. The biggest problem is some of them would need funds, and everybody would ask, what is the return of investment? The last thing you would find is the ROI. You know, if you ask about Tesla, for example, or Uber, when they made money, I don't think they ever even made money. And this is the issue, is that if someone would actually back you up, they're always expecting a return of their investment. And this is the mindset has to change. We are here to support. We are here to make them grow as a market size. The UAE is still not a big size country compared to Saudi Arabia, for example. So what we need to do, we need to support them, make them grow. And what we like to see is someone like Kareem, not one in a lifetime. We want to see more of those Kareems coming up, developing themselves here. We are here to support them as governments and give them the opportunity to thrive. But what I suggest is that we need to ask them to venture into different sectors. Technology is a big sector that we are not into it yet. We don't see a lot of entrepreneurs from the UAE venturing into this sector. And I believe this sector there is a lot of opportunities in the sector that we can actually make them focus on.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Yaren, we'll turn to you next. I think, especially, given your background and also some of the comments you made about the kind of global nature of kind of Israel's place in this ecosystem, we would love to hear you talk a little bit about community and the importance of community. What have you seen in terms of the role that community plays in creating successful entrepreneurial outcomes?
So I'm obviously biased because I run the largest Israeli tech community, but I've been able to see firsthand the profound impact of what I call emotion capital, EC. There's venture capital, which you need in order to power your company, but without EC, your company is dead. The founders, if they don't push through and have the resilience that His Excellency and Hanan were talking about, the company dies. Now, emotion capital, it comes from, within, but if all you're doing is interacting with other successful founders by reading articles online and hearing all the successful stories, it is very difficult when your company is not going up and to the right. And the reality of startups is that it's a mess. You fail the vast majority of the time, and hopefully you fail forward. Now, when you are surrounded by peers, fellow founders who are in the arena, in the trenches, as we call it, and you're getting together physically or online, and you're hearing the unfiltered stories of the challenges that come along with building a company from scratch, you are reinvigorated with emotion capital. You realize, first of all, you love what you're doing, and other people are struggling as much as you are. So the stories of failure, the stories of challenges, is the unique currency that a community of entrepreneurs can share with each other. If your entrepreneurial ecosystem doesn't encourage these kinds of structures, like the HAE, you are going to miss out on an opportunity to have emotion capital power resilience so that entrepreneurs keep going and don't fail backwards, but rather fail forwards.
Thank you, Yoran. I think I really agree with you on this part of emotional capital and community. And this takes me to you, Noor. You mentioned that to solve emerging problem in our market, in our region, it has to come from emerging founders. So for you, how do you know when you see there is a startup worth investing in, but from a VC perspective, what are those priorities, especially now with the pandemic is changing all those kind of priorities?
So, as a VC, we are driven by financial returns. Fortunately, unfortunately, it doesn't really matter. That's our job. And so we are trying to figure out ultimately what are some opportunities that affect hundreds of millions of lives in a way that is massively scalable, that makes the returns, and that can ultimately, as far as mission-driven founders, can make the world a better place. And I'll give you one or two examples. So, for example, one company we invested in 6 or 7 months ago in July does augmented reality for hospitals. So what Proximy does is it streams in specialist surgeons into operating rooms in hospitals so that if there's just a basic or a general surgeon in the operating room, they can operate and they can reduce complications and fatalities. Emerging market surgeon for 15 years working on cleft palates for children in war zones and other markets. Fast forward to today, COVID accelerated. Proximy has done 7,000 surgical interactions, works with the NHS across 250 hospitals. They've done interactions between the Cleveland Clinic and Afghanistan, saving lives. But they also take a look at, what is the difference between Boston, let's say, and rural America. You also have a massive discrepancy. But ultimately, this is an emerging market company that is solving a real problem where we have 1.3 doctors per 1,000 people, as opposed to 4.8 doctors per 1,000 people. So you're never going to graduate enough surgeons in time. How can we, using technology, bridge that gap? So that's what Nadine sets out to do. That is a company that is saving lives everywhere in the world, that is making great returns for our fund and for every other investor in there. It is a venture-backed company with venture returns and the ability to change lives at the same time. So our question to founders is always, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And why is that a problem? And is that a problem for 200 people or 200 million people, right? And so if that problem that you're trying to solve is really material enough and affects enough people, then you have a real opportunity as a venture capitalist to invest and support that founder. And if that problem is something that is also mission critical to making the world a better place, fantastic.
Thank you, Noor. Yeah, building on this, what are the problems the founders are trying to solve or to deal with? Hanan, let me ask you this. What do misconceptions in our community, in our region, when it comes to what accelerators, incubators do? How founders think or what they might get from such hubs?
Right. So let me just start by saying about what can entrepreneurs expect from an ecosystem. So when we were to launch Hub 71, even before we launched, of course, there was numerous meetings, sitting with startups, really understanding within the region. So both in Abu Dhabi, the UAE, and GCC, to understand what are their pain points. And we've worked with them on understanding these pain points and working with the different entities that can help us in releasing or unlocking some of those pain points. Cost of living, for example, so incentives around housing, office space, life insurance, etc. So these are some of the generic ones. But then there was also some of the more specific ones that are catered to, unique to this part of the world. So for example, banking, right? So setting up a bank account for entrepreneurs, something that sounds very simple and straightforward, but actually it's not. So working with the banks and the regulators on trying to solve some of those problems. So these are some of the problems that we can work with them and help them so they can expect that kind of support. I'm going to build on what Yaron mentioned about failure. So while we as an ecosystem enabler and developer are helping them with supporting them to minimize the failure, failure, we are not held accountable for the failure of the startups. So this is where the founders and the startups need to really hustle, right? They still need to put in the, put in the effort, have that drive, and work against everything that they can do to make sure that their startup is successful and is succeeding and is growing. So while we can help bridge that, try to minimize the risk of failure, we cannot guarantee that that we can failure-proof the businesses and the startups and their launch. So this is really on the startups.
Thank you, Hanan. Like any good entrepreneur, you took our question about challenges and turned it into one about opportunities. So thank you for that. Your Excellency, Marwan, we have another question for yourself, and I think it's related to this topic of resilience and failure and community. From your perspective, what does our region need to improve the maturity of our entrepreneurial culture? What is it going to take for more in our region to have a very real and mature entrepreneurial mindset?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think before answering this question, it's important to understand that we are in an age of disruption. A lot of things are happening that we never expected it to happen is actually happening. Things like Uber or Careem, things like Airbnb, we never thought that it would ever happen or ever been approved even by governments, where a whole industry is disrupted. And I've been reading an article about how ghost chickens or digital kitchens are actually booming and around the world to reach almost $1 trillion in the United States worth of investment. So what is great that we get to know is that opportunity doesn't have a limit, and there is an opportunity for every crazy idea might be a great opportunity to invest in. And whereas what we need to do is we need to ask officials to be prepared to accept such change that we never expected that we can do, which is having your own driver or a taxi, or having an autonomous vehicle, or venturing into a sector where a kitchen is not actually anymore a kitchen in a hotel, it is actually serving 17 different cuisines. How can we accept having such an industry being disrupted is something that we need to accept, because once we put a limit to an entrepreneur, we basically kill innovation. And what happens, why Palo Alto is thriving in that, is you can start your business in your own home from a garage. Why can't you start here? Is you need to have a trade license, you need to have an office, you need to have all of those hurdles that would actually kill your innovation, to the level that even your brand name can't be a brand name that you want to choose for yourself. So innovation, once you put limits to it, you basically destroy it. And that's, I always say innovation is like a spark. Once you hold that spark, it becomes a light, and it's like a candle. And then if you start blowing on it, that candle will never survive. And this is what we need. We need to create an ecosystem that will support and accept any crazy idea that it comes up. It might be so crazy that you would never even think about it, but they are here to support them, to make them grow or make them light. And I think this is the challenge that we need to accept within, I would say, the Arab world. The UAE might be in the forefront of the Arab world, but we're still behind when it comes to comparing to Israel or to comparing to America. We need to keep on supporting and accepting any crazy idea till it proves that it's a failure, and maybe even support it till it proves that it's a successful idea.
Okay, thank you, Your Excellency.
I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I thought that it's important to say how important to support those entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you, Your Excellency. Like the concept or the topic of entrepreneurship in our region, in MENA, it's not mature as it is in the US or Europe. So it's very important to take these challenges. And this take me to Yaron. Yaron just mentioned earlier, like the successful journey of Israel in the space of entrepreneurship. And as a country in MENA, so kind of share your opinion and what contribute to Israel's incredible outcome when it comes to entrepreneurship. How Israel succeeded in building the mindset of entrepreneurship within the community, within the people.
So I get this question a lot, and it is multifaceted. It's not a simple answer. There are some things that are cultural, but we actually share these, I think, cultural qualities here locally in the MENA region, where there's a tenacity for taking risk, trying, failing, iterating. Culturally, we're very different, for example, from Asia or Europe, where failure is a big it blacklists you in terms of your ability to get a loan or raise more money. In Israel, it's a notch on your belt. You basically, you've got something positive on your resume if you've made an attempt to build a company and failed. Your next time out, people assume you're more seasoned and ready to do it. So there's a culture that is very accepting of failure. That's something culturally ingrained, I think, in the Israeli mentality. We're risk takers, we're brash, and we're not afraid to fail. There are some technical things that can be done, and our country kickstarted, our entrepreneurship in technology space specifically back in the 80s when there was rampant inflation here, and we were just producing oranges basically in orchards. The government created a program called Yosma, which basically gave massive tax incentives for any foreign investor to invest in local technology companies. And they also matched with grants the investments that were made by foreign investors. And that all of a sudden kickstarted an inflow of capital to basically underwrite the initial failures, if you will, the trials and attempts, and eventually big companies that succeeded. An interesting note, a few weeks ago, the Israeli government's Israel Innovation Authority launched a very similar program, again, because of a very interesting phenomena that's happened here locally. And that is that although we've had a record-breaking year in venture capital dollars invested, the vast majority went to late-stage companies. Okay, the ecosystem has matured from the startup nation, building a cool technology widget and then selling it to some multinational. We now have 48 unicorns roaming the planet. We have the most companies listed on NASDAQ besides the US and China. So there are big companies being produced in Israel, but the little companies have had a very, very hard time in the age of Corona. And what did the government do? They created a hybrid seed incentive program. That's what it's called. And they are providing 40% grant matches to any seed stage company that raises money from a foreign investor. So they're giving no equity, free money, up to 40% of any investment round for a seed company. By the way, an interesting thing to note about that, if you are a seed company that's from the geographical periphery of Israel, or if you have founders from underrepresented communities like the Arab Israeli community, which is woefully underrepresented in our local Israeli tech ecosystem, the government will match up to 50% of your investment round. So you're seeing very proactive actions being taken by the local innovation authority. This is a government body to sort of spur on entrepreneurial activity underwritten with venture dollars. That's something that any nation can do. And especially, in the Arab region where there's lots of sovereign money and government money, these are practical things that can be done. The other most important thing I have to say, you need an assembly line of technical talent if you want to get into technical entrepreneurship. We have some of the best universities in the world that have very, very globally recognized tech programs at the level of MIT and Stanford. We have the Technion here, Hebrew University, Weizmann, etc. And of course, we have the military, which has elite programming units. So kids who are 18 years old going to college or the military are getting elite technical training to become full stack engineers, and they can build anything from deep AI to a consumer web app. That's very important for other governments and ecosystems locally to make sure you have enough technical talent to build the ideas that the entrepreneurs are coming up with.
Thank you, Yaron. I think your answer speaks to the multifaceted, real like ecosystem that needs to be in place for those kinds of outcomes. And I think that's exactly the kind of exploration across sectors that we're hoping to do through our own activities as HAE. Noor, we'd like to turn to you and actually start sharing some of these great questions that our audience has been asking. And there's one specifically for you from Basel. They want to know, what type of digital health solutions are you interested in investing in, and at what stage of development? Can you talk about your strategy around digital health solutions?
Absolutely. So we invest at Series A+. So once companies reach about $1 million in revenue, and the question is, how do you go from 2 rev to 20 rev in 2 years, right? So we try to be helpful in that scope of scaling up, and that's across the board, across fintech and health tech and all the different areas. In digital health, we've done an investment in Kenya, an investment in Nigeria. We've done a couple in Egypt, one in Jordan, namely Al-Tibbi, which some of you may be familiar with, which is health content that then enable telebooking and then teleconsultation, medical record storage, and now e-pharma. So really taking that patient all the way from I'm sick, what's going on with me, seeking information through their journey, hopefully to being well again, inshallah. So that's the patient journey on Al-Tibbi. In Nigeria, we invested in Helium Health. So we co-led that with Tencent and with AIC out of Japan. And that's an EMR for hospitals, regulators, patients, and then if you can't afford the treatment, the fintech. It's unique because it works online and offline. It's unique because it provides transparency, and because less than 30% of hospital visits in Africa are documented. So that's one that we find is really, again, changing the landscape. And in Kenya, we invested in Ilara, which is remote diagnostics. I talked earlier about Proximi. We've also done an investment in a company called Giblib, which is continuing education for doctors. So really, we take a look at it across the spectrum. We like enterprise solutions that cater towards hospitals and optimize hospitals, and that they have better sales cycles. They are easier to scale across border and tend to be more capital efficient. We also take a look at patient solutions that are direct to consumer. So we like enterprise as a firm. 70% of our first fund was enterprise, and we continue to take a look across the board.
There's a question from Khalifa. I think I'll ask this question to Hanan and Your Excellency Marwan to answer this question. Khalifa is saying, what should I take into consideration when deciding to launch a startup in an area that's still not regulated clearly, such as cryptocurrencies, for example? So yeah, we'll start with you, Hanan, and then Your Excellency.
Sure. So one of the things that about Hub 71 is we're based in Abu Dhabi Global Markets, ADGM, and startups that are setting up in Hub 71, they need to be ADGM licensed. Now, ADGM are relatively progressive in terms of what are they allowing in terms of startups to operate. So they have a sandbox. So if it's not necessarily a heavily regulated one, there are opportunities for startups to work within those parameters. And work within, it's an open-minded environment. They are looking at areas that within fintech that can support the economies. So I would encourage them to get in touch with them and see how we can support them.
Thank you, Hanan. Your Excellency Marwan, you've said at the beginning crazy ideas, innovation. Yeah. So what's your intake on this?
I guess with cryptocurrency, we heard a lot of things. It's here and it will never go away. So whether we like it or we don't, whether it's approved, agreed, government will accept it, whether we like it or we don't, it's going to happen. And we see how it is moving ahead. The government is going to happen. Do you really need the government support? Do you really need the regulations for it? And that's the question you need. Maybe if it's not the place that is encouraging for you to grow, then you find another market that you would venture into. And I think this is an important thing, because cryptocurrency might be 2 years ago, someone was talking about it's a bubble, but apparently it's no longer a bubble. It's trading higher than anyone would actually think about. Something that I would like to add on my previous note about entrepreneurship, it's very important also to create a corporate culture within entrepreneurs. And I think this is something that we miss out in a lot of entrepreneurs when they start their business. And focusing on what and why, and rather than on how. Focusing on a mission rather than a vision. And these are tips that entrepreneurs actually dismiss when they start their businesses. And I guess there isn't something that says right and wrong. It's like sailing, and you wouldn't know where to fish, but you would have to be so resilient that you're actually going to end up fishing at the end of the day. But I think it's a world that nobody will tell you what is right and wrong. But as Yaron said, we need to have government and regulations that will support you. And I like the idea in Israel where you have that entity that's called the Innovation Authority, that I think the Arab world would need to have an innovation authority. We used to have innovation weeks, for example, but I think an authority is something that you need here. And having a seed, an incentive program that's created from a federal government will actually really support. And I think if we use the example that we have in Israel, we will have a thrive in the entrepreneurship market within the UAE.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We're reaching the top of the hour, but we want to take just a few more questions from our audience. Yaron, I would love to ask you this next one. It comes from Mohammed, and he asks, we see a lot of efforts from incubators to help entrepreneurs and startups develop their business, but what about efforts to help local companies drive their intrapreneurship efforts? And I'd be curious to see if that's something you've looked at all in your founder community, and how you'd answer that question in the Israeli context.
Yeah, this is something that is actually done quite actively in a few large multinationals. I think one of the best examples is Intel. Intel has a program where they have created an internal incubator for Intel employees to come up with their own ideas, and they fund them and they help them build products for Intel. But they give great incentives, great financial incentives for the employees to do so. That's a model to be duplicated. Happy to connect anybody to the gentleman who runs it. In Israel, in particular, we have 356, I think now, multinationals that are running local R&D. And what they are typically doing is, one, hiring up talent by giving out above market salaries so that they get the best talent, but they're also acquiring companies. And so they are bringing into their large corporates very entrepreneurial people. And some of them, not all of them, I've seen actually most programs do this ineffectively, but some programs are quite effective in encouraging local intrapreneurship. What we don't have, and I would like to see, and I think is also a big opportunity in the UAE and in the broader Arab region, is actually a hub for entrepreneurs. There's lots of entrepreneur hubs, but I don't know, maybe Hanan, you might know of one, an intrapreneur hub where employees at corporates can actually meet centrally at some sort of a hub, get mentorship, get support, function as if they're running their own startups, but then have that IP owned by the corporate. I think that would do a tremendous amount for spurring entrepreneurship, much more than the corporates are able to do. When you take an employee outside of the company and let them interact with other entrepreneurs, they're going to be much more free to kind of think out of the box, if you will, literally. And I think that's an opportunity for Israel and the broader region.
Thank you. Do you want to say something or comment on this, Hanan? Okay.
I think there's a company out of Phoenix that runs a similar program. I don't remember their name right now, but I'll look it up. If anyone's interested, let me know and I'll send you the link.
Thank you, Hanan. One last question before we jump to our last closing question to all our speakers. So I would ask Noor, I think I've seen this question somewhere, but I think I lost it. But like in a stable region now, MENA is like an unstable region. So what advice you would give to founders, those who think to start, they have like a problem or challenge they want to solve, they want to start their business. So in this kind of instability that we are going through in our region, most of like some Arab countries. So what's your advice to them? So, sorry, no, 1 minute.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm happy to talk, but if it's not unmuted, then it doesn't really work. So I think, political stability and geopolitical instability is no longer unique to our region. I think it's a global phenomenon, and it has been for several years, and even more exacerbated by COVID. I actually, half jokingly often say that emerging market founders from geopolitically unstable regions have the added advantage of knowing what it feels like to navigate that. Whereas people who are used to a lot of stability from a regulatory perspective as well as geopolitical perspective may find this as a new variable in their equation. So my advice to founders is, focus on the problems that you can solve, focus on the variables that you can control, and really start small. And solve the problem for a few people and then a few more people, and then continue to grow your business. I always, like to say that your first client is much more important than your first investor. And I think that a lot of founders get hung up on building valuations, not creating value. So it's really focus on the problem, try to create value for your clients, and the investors will follow.
Thank you. Thank you. With this, I think we are running out of time. I don't want to take much of our speakers and audience time as well. So with this, I will leave it to Aaron to address the last question to our speakers.
Thank you, Abdullah. And thank you again to all of our speakers. And thank you to our audience members for such great questions. We'd like to ask each of our 4 speakers to end with a response to a somewhat selfish question by the HAE, which is, from your perspective, what do you need most from NGO or community organizations like ours, like the GCC/MENA HAE? How can our organization be most helpful to the development and progress of our region's entrepreneurial ecosystem? And Hanan, we'll start with you.
Sure, Aaron. So the Harvard University alumni, I mean, this would be a group of very talented and smart individuals. So just connecting with them, tapping into their intellectual capabilities, whether you are a startup or work in a startup or are an entrepreneur yourself or interested in mentoring or being part of our community, just being in touch with us. That's whether it's for knowledge transfer or for establishing your own startup out of Abu Dhabi. I think there are so many different opportunities. I would say, connecting with like-minded people is always something that we're looking for. And to what Yaron mentioned, there's something about community that's very important for startups. So just I would say this is an open invitation for this group of people to join our community and take a part in it.
Thank you. Your Excellency, yes.
Aaron, I think if we go back to our culture as an Emirati Arabian culture, one of the things that made our economy, our social life thrive are the majlises, where people can actually come, sit, talk, discuss, communicate, talk about opportunities, and you get to know a lot of things. You learn from others. You get to know what are the challenges that have been faced by that industry. How did this businessman failed, and how did that thrive? And who's looking at the new opportunity? What is coming up? And I think what is important, if the more often we meet up in those majlises where, like what we're doing today here, we get to know a lot of things. I came here with different knowledge. I came out hearing from Hanan, hearing from all of my colleagues, whether it's whether it's Noor, whether it's Yaron, a lot of information that I never knew about that ever existed. And the more often we have those majlises, that we get to know more about opportunities. And this is how we create a system where people get to know and learn from each other to thrive an economy.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. Yaron, do you want to add something? Answer this question, please.
I do. Listen, I think that the most profound opportunity here is actually outside of this call. We're kindred spirits here, and we're sort of preaching to the choir. We're part of MENA, and what I maybe underappreciate is that outside of our region here, we are very misunderstood. The MENA region is the brand connotation of the MENA region is driven by mainstream media in the West and in Europe, Asia, etc. We're pretty much a black box. If all you learn about MENA is through CNN, you've got a pretty skewed view. Those people are not participating in these kinds of calls and realizing, how much amazing activity is happening, how much collaboration is happening, etc., and the impact on the global innovation economy that we have as a region. Okay, I think the role of being able to have this branch of the HAE reach out to other branches and invite them to participate and see all of the activity that's happening in MENA is probably the most high impact contribution you can make. Because if Harvard alumni, who are the business leaders of tomorrow and today, are going to have a positive take on this region, the cascade effect of all the inbound interest and love and financial interest, etc., is going to have the biggest impact possible in the region. I want to give you one practical example before I sign out. Take a look at this. Harvard alumni group put together something called the Israel Summit. Okay, it's something that was an offline tour where Harvard alumni would come to Israel. We would host them at Tel Aviv. We also helped organize this year's event. They basically have created this massive summit for not only Harvard, but all the Ivy League universities and 150 universities across the US to basically have, a few days of a download of everything that the local Israeli ecosystem is doing to contribute to the global innovation economy. And when they leave this kind of a summit, they come away with a completely different picture of what the region means to the world than what they understood until that point by just, hearing about us through CNN. I think we can do something very similar in this branch by creating a similar type of summit so that all the Harvard alumni and even beyond can see all the amazing things that are happening, like what His Excellency talked about that we learned about today, which is mind-blowing. More people need to learn about it and realize how much greatness is happening here.
Thank you, Yaron. As someone who recently moved to this region from the States, I know exactly what it's like to form a perception of this place based only on CNN or the Times. So I appreciate that perspective. Unfortunately, Noor had to run. We've used up way more of her time than we are responsible for. So thank you, everyone, to all of our speakers and to the audience members for such great questions. I'll turn it over to my colleague, George, who will end our session with a few final thoughts. George?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
can you hear me? Yeah, hi, everyone. Hi. Thanks. Wow, I don't know what to say. I'm glad it's being recorded. Hopefully we can tap into it. Thank you very much to our speakers. I know Noor had to depart, but Your Excellency Marwan, thank you. Sincerely, thank you, Yaron, Hanan. we are very privileged to have you as part of our inaugural event. We have been very stimulated by your thoughts and sharing of your knowledge and experience. We very much look forward to continuing partnering with you and your organization. We would like to also thank the audience for their participation, and we look forward, as we discussed, to seeing future events. Over the coming year, we'll be shaping quarterly events, and these it's really a kind of work in progress. We like to reach out to you for ideas and possible participation in some of the concepts that we're going to put together as we go forward. And we would welcome your input, your ideas, and so forth. On the screen, hopefully, is going to be just a queue, but in any case, there's an email address there, MENA, MENA, there we go, harvardae.org. Please feel free to communicate with us. We meet on a regular basis. We are wanting to continue this dialogue with you. And also I speak for the team to knowing that we're all looking forward to just really pushing forward some of this ambitious ideas in this fertile plain of exchange and innovation in the greater region. And in fact, just a couple thoughts. I was in Riyadh just last week, and I stumbled onto a ghost kitchen, as the Excellency Mohan mentioned, unexpectedly, which was incredible to see it live. We want to focus on what entrepreneurs do best, make the world a much better and more dynamic place to live. Thank you. Thank you very much. See you all soon. And please remember, innovation begins with a conversation. And this is just the beginning. Thank you very much.